West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Glenn, the universe of people who are surprised is a universe of zero humans. But I wonder if that includes DOJ.
Oh, no, I don't think anyone is surprised. These filings don't tend to be enthralling reading, but this was a pretty well-written, well-articulated, and very readable. I'm giving it like a book review here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But it was a very
it's Trump.
It was just a very concise explanation of the range of their political and legal arguments, with a much more of a heavy emphasis on political arguments. They make a lot of references to the Presidential Records Act and suggest that they'll have this novel legal argument that the Presidential Records Act supersedes other things that are included in the indictment, including the Espionage Act. But the core of this is that, as you said in your introduction, that the fact that he's an active presidential candidate and the fact that Walt Nauta is by his side with coat on arm creates a different set of circumstances. And then there's this other larger argument that the sheer weight of the evidence that they have to go through, 833,000 documents have been presented thus far through the discovery process, makes it really tough for him and his legal team to deal with. Now, that said, I mean, one of the interesting dynamics is in making that particular argument, they cite the case of former Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega, saying Noriega needed more time to get his case together as an example of the complexity of the prosecution. But he really is, in this particular document, throwing everything on the table. And it seems, from our perspective, that he is challenging Judge Cannon to show her cards immediately. So we're going to find out within the next couple of weeks precisely what she's inclined to do as a result of her response to this document.
And Glenn, does the government respond in writing? I mean, are we awaiting a counter-argument from the government? Because I think the election you could argue it either way, right? He's running to be the commander-in-chief and to have access to every classified document the government possesses and creates and produces. He's sort of client number one for all of that. It seems to go to the heart of the job he thinks he's applying for again.
And also, there is, to that point, there's sort of the moral hazard question, right? Which is, does running for president and getting a lot of popular support essentially mean that you can set your own timetable in terms of an accusation of criminality, right? So it's one thing to sort of understand that there are special circumstances. It's another thing to grant someone special privileges. It's hard to discern from this document which one of those that they're requesting. But yeah, you can easily see Jack Smith and his legal team making the counter argument. And remember, this need for speed, the fact that Smith is pushing ahead expeditiously, which was in his press release when he took the job, that he wants to move ahead as quickly as possible, is part of his mandate. He wants to get as much done before the political season kicks in, which is why he set such an aggressive trial timetable and would like to, at least on paper, get this thing rolling before the end of the year.
There is nothing new, Pete Strzok, about Donald Trump wanting to use DOJ as his sort of personal legal defense department. What is new is running in front of the American public as, you know, the public is basically a human shield. He says, vote for me and you will protect me from criminal accountability for crimes that not only did I think Hillary Clinton should have been locked up for, things she didn't do, but the very essence of being the country's commander in chief is on the line in the outcome of these rulings and in this case in general. And I wonder what you make of all the power right now as we wait with bated breath to see what Judge Aileen Cannon does, the power she has over determining whether we live in a country with two systems of justice, one for Trump and one for everyone else.
Yeah, well, Nicole, it's certainly true that he's being treated differently than any other defendant that I've seen. Having said that, I haven't seen charged individuals who are running for president. So this, you know, these aren't absurd arguments that are being made by his attorneys. There is something special about charging and bringing to trial somebody who is presumptively the Republican nominee for the presidency. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, this is absurd. If you go back to Trump himself in 2016, he said, should Hillary Clinton be indicted, that might cause something along the lines of a constitutional crisis, and she should consider dropping out of the race because it would be that damaging and that severe. So he's spoken about this exact issue and what he thinks somebody should do only when that person is his opponent. But look, I think there is no question that if you can't charge somebody while they're the president, if you can't charge them if the argument is while they're running for the presidency, then what? You have a 1.5-year window where if there's a broad range of criminality, that's the only time where they can be brought to trial. I mean, that strains credulity. Now, of course, as you noted, all eyes now are going to focus on Judge Cannon. I think she has a lot of latitude. She doesn't need necessarily to agree to some indefinite postponement. The fact of the matter is, just in the SEPA litigation, the litigation surrounding classified information alone, that can take, if Trump is so inclined to slow it down, that can take months and months and months just to address the classified issues, notwithstanding any other pre-trial litigation. So I would be very surprised to see her say, you know, yes, this is delayed indefinitely. Of course, you know, who knows? We're all playing a little bit of a guessing game. But I have very little expectation that this trial is going to occur anytime in 2023.
Wow. David Jolly, let me show you Chris Christie's description of what Trump is actually motivated by right now as he lobs this filing in.
If we offer you a plea, which I'm certain they will, and you turn it down, and you take us to trial, and you're convicted, that judge is sending you to jail. And I think that's what he goes to bed every night thinking. Every night. And all this bravado and everything else, I've known him for 22 years. And when I was doing these cases in New Jersey, and I would put political figures in jail, he would say to me, I could never do that. I could never go to jail. And I'm telling you, no matter what he says, no matter how he's bragging and going on and on about him not being afraid, he goes to bed every night thinking about the sound of that jail cell door closing behind him.
This is something that I have understood to be the case with Trump since he was running for president the first time. This is something I understood to be the impetus for his rage, his unbridled rage at Jeff Sessions when he recused from the Russia investigation and allowed for Mueller to be appointed. This drove all the rageful tweets at Rod Rosenstein, at Jim Comey, at Pete Strzok, at Lisa Page, at Andy McCabe. This terror of being held accountable for things that he knows in his head expose him to criminal liability is what has driven everything we've seen him do on the public stage, on the political stage. So the irony, David Jolly, in him arguing, I'm going to be back on my political stage, you can't hold me accountable, is just rich.
Yeah, it is, Nicole. Look, Donald Trump is somebody we know who has these quiet fears, right? And it manifests itself in his anger and his outrage. But I think Chris Christie also skipped over the former president's vanity, somebody who probably thinks that he is above accountability. And that is a toxic mixture in somebody who is now facing the loss of liberty in New York, as well as federally and potential with additional charges in other jurisdictions. I do think it's important for, look, as you said, surprise no one that he asked for a delay until after the election. I think we need to break his argument in half on this for one very important reason. They are suggesting the delay is necessary because he is a candidate for the presidency, not because he's the president. If he was the president, you could understand the delay. Becoming a candidate is a decision, an election that he has made in his personal life. And every candidate has real life stuff to deal with. Jobs, home, perhaps legal proceedings. This is not new to be facing a legal proceeding while you're a candidate. And so I don't think that argument will ultimately hold up. What we do know is it's going to strain the courts. And I think this is just leading the nation into something that I'm not sure we are fully prepared for yet, which this presidential cycle is going to absolutely strain justice as we know it in the United States, and is going to put some very important questions in front of the American people next November. If we view it through a political lens as partisan voters, we are going to miss the greater story here, which is the possibility of our democracy and justice in America fracturing next November.
It is Wednesday, the 12th of July of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests, these meddlesome youth pastors grooming our children? Wait, not a drag queen among them. As far as we know, that's what they'll say. It's all a government Antifa plot. Yeah, it's like that's a bad thing. Oh, I mean, a plot to make them look bad. I don't know. You don't have to go very far to make them look bad. That's all that was meant to denote. Anyway, it is Wednesday, and we're just getting started here, or are we? Hey, we might have been getting started a couple of hours ago. Still early in many parts of America, still. So, it looks like, obviously, at the top there, Trump is running to stay out of jail. He was running to stay out of jail when he first ran. When he ran the second time and lost. And then there was a bit of a lag there, and he was able to, I wouldn't say lay low, but, the wheels of justice move very slow. Not this justice, though I'm moving slower than I used to, a lot. But the wheels of justice do move incredibly slow. And when you're a mobster and you're getting help, you'll wait that baby out. I love how, now, did Jack Smith make a tactical error in combining Nuwata, is that his name, and Trump together rather than splitting up their indictment? Because now we get to use old Walt as an excuse to delay. We have so much to look over. Well, it's funny because I was watching some lawyer movies from the 80s and the 90s. And when they were deluged with discovery, everybody in the firm just dug in and worked day and night to go through it until they found the little tidbits that they could use to be able to craft a defense to keep their client from going to the chair or the chamber. We didn't have firing squads, but they would have gone there too. Keep them out. So now all a lawyer has to say, I'm so indignant. I can't look at all this by myself. I don't have a team. And the judge says, well, I've only been a judge, for a couple of years, and I'm not even 30 yet. And there's no one around here to ask about what I should do in this situation. So you know what? I'll go with my gut. And my gut says I got through the Federalist Society for one task, and that is to make sure that representative democracy is no more. So I will grant your continuance. Anything else you want? Oh, you want me to dismiss the case? Well, I got to let it go on a little bit. I was told I have to let it go on for a little bit. This is where we are. We warned everybody they were unqualified, but that didn't matter to the Republican Party because they are tasked to destroy America. Why would they want to keep our judiciary intact? Every authoritarian regime goes after the judiciary, demeans it, belittles it, says that they're going to get rid of them. And if they don't hew the line, someone's going to show up at your door, and if your kid answers the door with his dad, they're both going to get shot dead. Because, hey, even a mistake sends a message. Can you imagine Fred Hampton going after J. Edgar Hoover saying, we're going to get him? And then, hundreds of thousands or millions of Black Panthers? I don't know. Were there millions? No. Then started harassing J. Edgar Hoover and anybody who hewed the line with J. Edgar Hoover. Can you imagine what would have happened? Heck, we already saw it during the Trump years when there was a Black Lives Matter march in D.C. They had SWAT helmeted ninja turtles guarding the Lincoln Monument, the Capitol, everything. But when it was white nationalist Nazis, come on in, we'll just put up a couple of bicycle barriers to make it look like, we have control over the situation. I'm not blaming the D.C. cops that got the crap beat out of them. I'm talking about the leadership that decided one was more scary than the other. Okay. Shall I just stop my disdain for all that they are and just give you a hint about what we have in store for you in this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? On the rest of the menu, after that introduction there about Trump trying to stay out of jail, because I'm hoping, I keep my fingers crossed that it doesn't matter, he's still going to jail. Well, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe, the Utah Supreme Court scrutinized the process that sliced the state's most Democratic-heavy county into 4 districts. And they actually weren't too happy with the Republican-leaning excuse for why they did it. Deputies who reported a Texas sheriff to public corruption investigators say nothing was done. Well, you tell the Texas Rangers a fellow is corrupt, and they're going to say, oh, yeah, we'll look into it. And Bank of America has been ordered to reimburse customers and pay big-time fines for double-dipping on overdraft fees, withholding reward bonuses on credit cards, and opening accounts without customers' consent. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Japan's Supreme Court ruled government restrictions on a transgender employee's use of restrooms is illegal. And the European Union faces a cliffhanger vote on a major bill protecting nature and fighting climate change. Do we vote for it? Do we vote against it? It doesn't seem difficult to me. Well, all that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and she is on her way at this very moment to Netroots Nation in Chicago. Train got canceled because of the terrible weather. Amtrak says no way, but she was able to secure a bus ride, I presume it's Greyhound. They're willing to do it. And last I heard, quite early this morning, our time, she was in Philly. And so that's a little bit on her way. So we look forward to Kelly at Netroots Nation in Chicago this year. Thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you out there in radio listening land would take a gander across the page to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It really does help us pay our bills. And many people have done that, and we thank them for helping us, because those bills are not cheap. No, they're not. And thank you once again for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. I should once again mention that Tom takes care of those for us, and thank you, Tom, for everything. He is getting us to bug out of Twitter, so but we're still there, and I will be there. Like I said, I'm going to be on the rail of the ship as it goes down. I'll be jumping out at the very last moment with scores of others, hoping we don't get sucked into the undertow. Maybe I'll take off a little bit before that and hope I don't freeze to death, but no, I'll be fine. I found some warm places to land already. See? But anyway, Tom takes care of those, and you can find us there. So do. You can follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. Now, I post those show notes and links diaries on Daily Kos still. They come up automatically 10 minutes before showtime, and you can always find them by following my social media feeds, because the links to the actual reportage are all there. All of them. You can also follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, the account on Twitter. But anyway, that's at Cookbook West. And please, please, please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, not Stitcher, because SiriusXM got rid of Stitcher. Thanks. I appreciate that. Okay, but you can generally find us wherever podcasts can be found. You just can't find it on Stitcher, because where is it? I know, part of it's still there. Alrighty. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it is by Sam Metz from the Associated Press. The Utah Supreme Court grilled attorneys representing the state yesterday, Tuesday, over their claim that courts should not intervene in the Republican-controlled legislature's decision to carve up Democratic-leaning Salt Lake County into 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 congressional districts. Justices did not rule after oral arguments that were held yesterday, but appeared skeptical of the state's argument that districting process could not be subject to a broad judicial review. The Republican legislature says, you can't even look at it. The fight asks if state courts can evaluate whether district maps drawn by elected officials violate the state constitution, and is the latest battle over how states draw such maps. It follows a recent landmark U.S. Supreme Court rule denying legislatures absolute power to do so. Utah, along with Kentucky, New Mexico, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Alaska, is among the states in which Republicans and Democrats have battled over whether partisan gerrymandering violates the law and imperils people's right to choose their representatives in a democracy rather than the representatives choosing the voters. Utah differs from those other venues, however, because voters in 2018 approved an initiative creating an independent redistricting commission designed to ensure maps were not drawn to favor one party over another. Its power was stripped a year and a half later by the legislature, which divided Salt Lake County, where Joe Biden won in 2020 by 11 points, into 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, congressional districts. 7 voters and 2 advocacy groups, the League of Women Voters, remember them? This one's a chapter of Utah, and the Mormon Women for Ethical Government. Sued the legislature last year over the maps passed in 2021. In their lawsuit, they argue the Republican-drawn map takes a slice of Salt Lake County, which is the state's most Democratic-leaning, and grafts it into large swaths onto the rest of Utah. The effect is to disperse non-Republican voters among several districts, diluting their electoral strength and stifling their contrary viewpoints, their attorneys argue in court documents. Attorneys for Utah want the state Supreme Court to dismiss the case and argue districting is solely a matter for the legislature to decide. And it's beyond the purview of the courts. If the case proceeds, a judge could potentially rule the maps unconstitutional and initiate a court-directed process to redraw the districts. The case is the latest high-profile redistricting battle and follows 2 U.S. Supreme Court rulings on maps drawn by state legislatures. In 2019, the court ruled that district maps and partisan gerrymandering claims challenging them were outside the purview of federal courts and for states to decide. Then last month, it decided that lawmakers were bound by state constitutional restraints in drawing maps and said the state Supreme Court in North Carolina had the jurisdiction to review the state maps. Attorneys in Utah, in earlier court filings, asked justices to delay their decision until the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on that case known as Harper v. Moore. In opening arguments yesterday, Tuesday, Utah's attorneys did not lean into the concept at the heart of North Carolina's arguments, known as the independent state legislature theory. However, Utah's 4 congressional members relied heavily on the theory in a brief they filed in support of the state. But similar to attorneys representing North Carolina, Utah's argued redistricting was a legislative matter and court intervention threatens the separation of powers between the courts and the legislatures. The state tempered its arguments, though, as Republican state lawmakers sat behind her. Attorney Taylor Meehan acknowledged the legislature did not have absolute power to draw maps, but she warned that court intervention risked injecting arbitrary standards into redistricting beyond the court's power. Actually, it would be nonpartisan, not favoring one party over the other. But we know that's not fair to Republicans. Blyberg of the AP brings us this next offering here. In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A Texas sheriff who has been the subject of years of complaints about dysfunction and corruption was repeatedly reported to state and federal law enforcement by his own deputies. Yet an outside investigation never gained momentum, according to interviews and records reviewed by the Associated Press. Two of San Jacinto County Sheriff Greg Caper's former deputies said they tried to get the Texas Rangers to look into wrongdoing in the sheriff's office when they worked there, but the state's elite investigative agency did little to pursue a case. One of them later gave a detailed interview to an officer with the FBI's Regional Public Corruption Task Force, but said it was met with the same result. Despite reports from members of law enforcement, the state and federal agencies appear not to have pursued what an AP investigation found were long-standing accusations that Caper's office has ignored misconduct and neglected basic police work while pursuing asset seizures that boost its $3.5 million budget but don't always hold up in court. The small Houston area sheriff's office drew national scrutiny amid a 4-day search for a man accused of killing 5 neighbors in April when they complained that his late-night shooting was keeping their baby awake. The sheriff's office disclosed in response to AP's questions that deputies took nearly 4 times as long as Capers initially said to arrive at the mass shooting. Last year, county leaders paid nearly $50,000 to have a police consulting firm examine the sheriff's office, but disregarded its recommendation to ask the Rangers Public Corruption Squad to investigate. The consultant's report says Capers fostered a fear-based culture, oversaw the improper seizure of tens of thousands of dollars of property, and that his deputies failed to follow up on reports of 4,000 crimes. Everybody in law enforcement knows what's going on, but nobody will do anything, said Michael Flint, a former deputy who won a $240,000 settlement after suing the sheriff's office for retaliation when it fired him and charged him with crimes in 2018. A judge later dismissed the criminal charges. Capers did not respond to requests for comment. His second-in-command previously called the accusations against the sheriff straight-up lies and stressed their good working relationship with the Rangers and said the state agency is welcome to investigate their office top to bottom. Oh. So you're implying the Texas Rangers may be corrupt as well? Ooh, tell us more. A Ranger spokesperson said they are not conducting an investigation into this matter. I wonder why. Flint, a veteran Houston officer who Capers personally recruited, said he drove to the regional state office, or the state regional police office, in the fall of 2017. He said he spoke with 3 Rangers and showed them documents supporting his accusations, including that Capers improperly handled seized assets and dismissed concerns about an affair between a deputy and an informant in a series of gambling cases. Flint said the Rangers told him they would need approval from their higher-ups to pursue an investigation, and that he never heard back. The next year, Michael Voitko said he called one of the same Rangers in tears after finding a tracking device on the bottom of a San Jacinto County patrol car. Voitko recalled telling the Rangers that he was terrified for his safety after challenging what he saw was wrongdoing at the sheriff's office. He said the Ranger responded that he would write a report, but nothing could be done because it was a sheriff's department vehicle. In October of 2020, after Voitko left the sheriff's office for another job in law enforcement, he spoke with an FBI task force officer. Records reviewed by the AP show the officer took detailed notes, writing that Voitko's allegations focused on Capers misusing seized funds and that other deputies could testify to what has been going on. An FBI spokesman said the agency does not discuss complaints or neither confirms nor denies the existence of investigations, and Voitko said he never saw any sign of one. To my knowledge, nothing was ever done. Chapman and Ken Sweet bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bank of America will reimburse customers more than $100 million and pay $150 million in fines for double-dipping on overdraft fees, withholding reward bonuses on credit cards, and opening accounts without customer consent. Combined, it is one of the highest financial penalties in years against Bank of America, which has largely spent the last 15 years trying to clean up its reputation and market itself to the public as a bank focused on financial health and not on overdraft fee income and financial trickery. B of A must refund $100 million to customers, pay $90 million in penalties to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and $60 million to the offices of the Comptroller of the Currency. Bank of America wrongfully withheld credit card rewards, double-dipped on fees, and opened accounts without consent, said CFPB Director Rohit Chopra in a statement. These practices are illegal and undermine customer trust. Empowered by a broad mandate from the White House, Chopra and the Bureau have focused heavily in the past year on the issue of junk fees that are charged to Americans that are often seen as unnecessary or exploitive by banks, debt collectors, airlines, and concert venues. Banks such as B of A, J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and others have been a target for the Bureau under the Biden administration. Part of the fines and penalties come because B of A had a policy of charging customers $35 after a bank declined a transaction because the customer did not have enough funds in their account. The agency determined that the bank double-dipped by allowing fees to be repeatedly charged for the same transaction. The fees often came when customers had routine monthly transactions like a gym membership. Now, this is the oldest tactic in the world. This is why I dropped them, because they convinced me to sign up for my paycheck to be automatically deposited, and then they, on their own, took all of my automatic bill paying and put it in before my deposit for my paycheck so that every single one of those would bounce in the hours before they allowed my deposit to go through. Back to the article at hand. If a customer had too low of a balance to cover the transaction, it would be declined, and B of A would charge the customer a $35 fee. The business, who hasn't been paid, often would recharge the customer's account, resulting in another $35 non-sufficient funds fee. The bank ended this practice last year, but will still have to repay customers who got charged before the policy was changed. I don't think they're going to allow me to have any money since this happened in the 90s. B of A sucks. B of A has been cutting down on its reliance on overdraft fee revenue for more than a decade, and cut how much it charges customers for an overdraft to $15 last year. Bank of America also offered people cash rewards and bonus points when signing up for a card, but the CFPB said the bank illegally withheld promised credit card account bonuses. And the agency also found that since 2012, Bank of America employees illegally applied for and enrolled customers in credit card accounts without their knowledge or authorization. It was similar to, but smaller than, a charge that was made against Wells Fargo, which paid billions in fines after it was determined that the San Francisco bank opened millions of unauthorized bank accounts in order to meet unrealistic goals. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Not Dialed Back. Plans for a fifth Indiana Jones movie go back to the 70s, when 4 sequels were negotiated after Raiders. With passing time and corporate changes, this one, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, is the first not conceived by Lucas or directed by Spielberg. Instead, directorial duties have fallen to James Mangold of Logan and Ford vs. Ferrari fame, and he and his 9-figure budget have done a good job wrapping the franchise. For villains, we're back to Nazis. This one opens in 1944 with Harrison Ford's character on a train full of Nazi loot, where we're introduced to an archaeological object said to facilitate time travel. More accurately, it's half the object. Fast forward 25 years and we find the combatants from the train, Indy, now a Columbia professor, and the Nazi officer, now working for NASA, globetrotting to find the other half. The quote-unquote former Nazi has some corrections in mind for the timeline vis-a-vis World War II. As expected, familiar characters appear, though the film doesn't seem weighed down by subplots to accommodate such appearances. New cast members include a dazzling Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Indy's goddaughter and actual daughter of Indy's colleague from the opening scene. Her character is that of an antiquities dealer of dubious ethics, but who's always on the right side when it counts, and Mads Mikkelsen, bringing off the Nazi Jürgen Voller with evil aplomb. Is Indiana Jones the Dial of Destiny an unintentional metaphor for recapturing past thrills? Maybe. Once again, we get chases, walks through caves, and we even see the whip in one scene, though it feels a bit forced. Even if it is that metaphor, though, it's a must-see for generations of fans. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces. Just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes? Their age? The way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break,
because she may not be having lunch again until September.
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table.
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
What grows in the forest? Trees? Sure. Know what else grows in the forest? Our imagination, our sense of wonder, and our family bonds grow too. Because when we disconnect from this and connect with this, we reconnect with each other and build family memories we will carry with us forever. The forest is closer than you think. Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. It's easy. Just put in your zip code to find family-friendly outdoor destinations near you. You'll also find guides to free activities, games, and amazing forest facts. Give the magic of the outdoors to your kids and reconnect with your family. Find a forest near you at discovertheforest.org. That's discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can colleges have affirmative action admissions programs for rich white people? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. A recent Supreme Court decision involving Harvard and the University of North Carolina struck down affirmative action, consideration of diversity as a factor in college admission decisions. Justice Gorsuch, part of the 6-3 majority, in his additional concurring opinion said that legacy admissions, applicants with relatives who are donors and alums, quote, undoubtedly benefit white and wealthy applicants the most. Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, agreed with that. At highly selective colleges, legacy admissions make up between 4 and 23% of the first-year class. Indeed, at Cornell, Dartmouth, Notre Dame, and USC, legacy students outnumber black students. And only a very few colleges, MIT, Johns Hopkins, and Amherst, for example, have eliminated legacy admissions. Experience shows that eliminating legacies will in fact increase racial diversity. And after the Supreme Court's decision, 3 civil rights groups filed a complaint at the Federal Department of Education against Harvard, claiming that legacy admissions violate federal statutory law by discriminating against black, Hispanic, and Asian applicants in favor of less qualified white ones. Until that complaint is finally decided, we won't know for sure whether affirmative action programs in college admissions may continue for rich people who are disproportionately white. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1850. That was the birthday of Oscar Neebe. Neebe was one of 8 men convicted of inciting violence at a workers' rally at Haymarket Square in Chicago in 1886. He was born in New York City, where he became a skilled tinsmith. He moved to Chicago in 1877, where he worked at the Adams Westlake Manufacturing Company. He was fired and blacklisted when he tried to organize his fellow workers. This, however, did not stop his organizing efforts. Oscar founded his own business, the Acme Yeast Company, and turned his attention to organizing brewery workers. He was active in the Chicago Central Labor Union. By 1886, the labor movement was growing in power and action in Chicago. On May 1st, thousands took to the streets in strikes and demonstrations for the 8-hour workday. 3 days later, a bomb was thrown by an unknown assailant at a workers' rally protesting police violence against demonstrators. No one knows to this present day who threw the bomb. 8 men were tried and convicted for the crime. Oscar Niebuhr was sentenced to 15 years in prison in Joliet, Illinois. 4 of his fellow accused were executed by the hangman's rope. After 6 years in prison, Niebuhr was pardoned by Illinois Governor John Peter Altgeld. His first wife died shortly after the trial. It is said she died of a broken heart. At his trial, Niebuhr wrote, quote, "I have been in the labor movement since 1875. I have seen how the police have trodden on the Constitution of this country and crushed the labor organizations. I am sorry I am not to be hung with the rest of the men." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low 90s, pretty much the same as yesterday. Sunny throughout the day with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight, lows around 60, not nearly cool enough for my liking overnight, but winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then mainly sunny skies tomorrow with highs in the mid-90s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen remains high here in our little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region has come down quite a bit. It's in the good range at 18 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains very high at level 9, so you know what to do. Take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.05 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 62%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 70 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 76 and sunny. Rome is 97 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kyiv is 75 degrees and fair. Kabul is 78 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 85 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 45 and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay for fog. And New York, New York is 87 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Mary Yamaguchi of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Japan's Supreme Court ruled yesterday, Tuesday, that restrictions imposed by a government ministry on a transgender female employee's use of restrooms at her workplace are illegal, and a landmark decision that could promote the rights of LGBTQ plus people in a country without legal protections for them. It was the court's first ruling on the working environment for LGBTQ plus individuals. The judges said in a unanimous ruling that the Economy and Trade Ministry's restrictions, which forced the employee to use either a nearby men's room or women's room restrooms at least 2 floors away, were extremely inappropriate. It said the approval of the restrictions by the National Personnel Authority, which is supposed to serve the interests of government employees, was illegal and an abuse of power. The victory by the plaintiff, identified only as a transgender female ministry official in her 50s who sued the government over toilet access, was good news for the LGBTQ plus community in Japan, the only member of the group of 7 industrialized nations where same-sex marriage is not legal. The decision comes at a time of increased awareness and support for the rights of LGBTQ plus people. Activists have increased their efforts to achieve an anti-discrimination law since a former aide to Prime Minister Kishida said in February that he would not want to live next to LGBTQ plus people and that citizens would flee Japan if same-sex marriage were allowed. But opposition to equal rights remains strong within Kishida's governing Liberal Democratic Party, known for its conservative values. In June, Parliament passed a contentious law to promote awareness of sexual minorities without providing legal rights.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Rafe Cassard of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Protesters and legislators converged on the European Union Parliament yesterday, Tuesday, as the bloc prepared a cliffhanger vote on protecting its threatened nature and shielding it from disruptive environmental change in a test of the EU's global climate credentials. Spurred on by climate activist Greta Thunberg, a few hundred demonstrators demanded that the EU push through a bill to beef up the restoration of nature in the 27-nation bloc that was damaged during decades of industrial expansion. A counter-demonstration of farmers demanded a slower approach that would lessen the impact on their income. Inside the legislature in Strasbourg, France, parliamentarians put in last-minute efforts to sway today's vote, which could push a key part of the EU's biodiversity protection plans off the table. The legislature's Environmental Committee last month was deadlocked at 44 to 44 on it. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.